Remember those unseasonably warm days at the end of February? I certainly do. Unfortunately, they were followed by snow mid-April, but those gorgeous winter days did have me thinking about my queen, my goddess, my cat, Chole. I've kind of been wondering this whole winter if she's been a little depressed. In Utah, she was an indoor-outdoor kitty. She'd go outside, roll around in the sand. She'd come in and smell like dirt and sunshine. She'd watch, chase, climb, all of the things. These days, she's an indoor girl. On top of ticks, we have fox, coyote, bobcats, bears, not so worried about the bears, but even the occasional lynx. So she'd get eaten pretty quick. So inside, she stays. So on those warm winter days, we let her out on the porch and she got to watch all those critters. And not surprisingly, she perked right up. And for me, the spark was lit. I needed to make a kitty cat oasis. The first thing that I'd like to add to the kitty cat oasis is, of course, a cat tower. Now, my Pinterest board is filled with very elaborate custom cat stuff, but my living situation here is temporary, hopefully. And I can't go permanently fixing the house, screwing into it, altering it in any way. So rather than custom making something for a temporary space, I'm gonna buy something instead. Unfortunately, most cat towers seem to be made out of compressed paperboard and carpet, of course, both of which will absorb rain, disintegrate, and also hold the moisture and create mold. So what I'd like to buy instead is something completely made out of wood that I can stain and I can polyurethane so that it will withstand the elements a little bit better. Because on the screened-in porch, when it rains, water does come in a little bit. So with a quick Google search, I did find a few wooden cat towers. Many of them were very expensive. This one was the cheapest on the list and honestly the most appealing because the height, of course, was adjustable as well as the landing spaces for the cats, so I could customize it to multiple different spaces in the future. The package arrived just the other day. I need to get this up to the barn so I can go ahead and seal it and let it cure and dry out of the rain, which it is actually raining right now. So let's boogie this up there real quick. The next thing on my list is something very easy, and that's cat grass. Staining's not gonna happen today, certainly not in these clothes, but before I head back to the house, I do need to grab one more thing. And that is this bin. This was used to feed my parents' last horse who passed away this last winter. He needed to have wet hay in order to be able to eat it. This is what we used that for. And so I thought this would be the perfect planter for the cat grass. But let's bring this down to the house and consolidate all of our working materials. Okay, today, we're gonna go ahead and get that cat grass planted. We've had a few warm days and it's consistently warm enough that I don't think anything's gonna die outside. I'm in my work clothes working on last week's project, and so I have a spare moment. I'm gonna go ahead. Chloe is clearly very excited about the potentiality of cat grass. Are you excited? So I'm gonna grab my containers, the large one that'll be out on the porch. I'm also gonna grab a few smaller ones so that I can have a few smaller cat grass planters going inside. Once one dies out, I'll have the next one available, and so we can kind of create this cycle so that something is always available for the kitties to nibble on, because these spider plants are really bearing the brunt of some kitty gnawing. So once I have my containers, I'll grab my topsoil, I'll grab my seed, we'll head out to the porch and get things planted. When filling my bin with soil, I made sure to leave a little bit extra so that it could be sprinkled over when I added the seeds. But before all that, I made sure to water the soil so that the seeds wouldn't shift and clump together. I hadn't planted cat grass in a while, so I went a little light here, and I feel like I could have added more, but in retrospect, it was the perfect amount. Okay, I'm gonna leave this by the screen for light, of course, as well as maybe get a little bit of rain. I set the small container of cat grass next to the spider plants in front of the bird feeder in hopes that the cats would be more enticed to eat the grass than the spider plants. I did also end up purchasing some catnip. My cat isn't the biggest fan, but my parents' cat is absolutely crazy for it. So I purchased one seedling to add to the big box of cat grass. And as you can see here, it is in fact a huge hit. Luca does this for a while. And so while the grass and catnip grow, it's time to turn my attention to the cat tower. It's time to open this thing up and see what I've got. The listing doesn't state if it's finished or not, and it does state it as some man-made wood material. So I want to see if there's a finish on it, or if I'm going to need to do some sanding before some staining. So it looks like it's just plywood, which is fantastic. It does have fleece on one side, and I wasn't sure if I should rip that up or not. I guess I'm going to see how things go. Clearly, I did decide to remove it. I didn't want any stain or polyurethane being soaked up by the felt and exposed to the cats. It would also prevent me from staining and polyurethaning the wood underneath, so the felt would hold moisture and eventually mold and rot. The corners were tricky to start, but after a while I had all 7 landing pieces stripped. What was left behind was this tacky, sticky film. My first thought was to sand this away, but after quite a while of sanding just this one board, all I managed to do was just move some glue around and only managed to sand this one teeny tiny spot. Getting this glue off with a sander would take me an insanely long time. I decided to move on to staining the undersides while contemplating how to remove the sticky adhesive. I found some stain we already had that I liked and started in with that. Once I had 4 pieces stained, I would rotate through, wiping the stain off of one so that it had time to saturate the wood to the desired color. After some thought, I decided to strip the glue off, and this did the trick. There was still some residual residue on the boards after the first coat, so I did end up having to do a second and even a third layer on some of the pieces to get all of the adhesive off, which in the end it did all come off. And it was incredibly satisfying to scrape off, I might add. With the adhesive finally removed, I was then able to move on to polyurethaning all of the wooden pieces. I made sure to cover every bit of exposed wood, to apply 3 coats to each side and allow everything to dry before applying the next coat. This step took me days. With all the rain we've been having, I made sure to leave more than the allotted dry time before construction. But when I did get started with the construction, it flew right along. But I'm also one of those people who really likes to construct IKEA furniture. While the pieces didn't arrive warped, after staining and polyurethaning, they were. The humidity probably didn't help a whole lot either, but it still came together quite easily. Once this other piece was constructed, I slipped one of the main body pieces over it. Though it looks like it's the bottom, it's actually the top. Once the main components were screwed together, I screwed on the blocks that would bridge the gap and connect all the pieces. Lining the 2 holes up was a bit difficult, but once I figured out the trick, this flew along. Now I thought I was in the final stretch. Boy, was I wrong. I tried to erect and tension this tower multiple times, trying to get the height and tension correct,
Ultimately, I found that the height of the beams was just a hair short of being able to fit the top cap, but as it's going up against a wooden beam and not a drywall ceiling, it shouldn't be a problem. But man, this took me a while, and it was quite the undertaking with only one person. I remember reading a review that said having an extra person handy is good, and I completely agree, as the tower will not adjust height with the bottom bolt until there's already tension put on it. So in order for you to get that tension, you may need to use two hands, while also holding this tall wooden tower still. It was tricky for sure. Now that I had the tower up, I could finally place those landing pieces. But first, I had to go get them from the barn. Back from the barn, I could finally place these pieces. I did have to play around with the orientation a bit, and a few of the pieces even had to be hammered in, because the polyurethane made all the pieces slightly larger. It was a bit like a game of Tetris, but in the end, I did find a configuration that I liked. Now, the only thing that was left to do was to place this last small piece, and the tower was finally complete.
The cats have been loving the cat grass. Not only have they been eating it, but Chloe's been laying on it, which is something I was really hoping for. I was feeling bad that she didn't have the opportunity anymore to have dirt under her paws, and so the fact that she's comfy, cozy, lounging around, and having some earth under her makes me super happy. The cat tower, however, is something entirely separate. They are not using it as much as I would have hoped. Chloe does use it occasionally to get all the way up into the rafters of the porch so she can stare down on us from above, but doesn't use it as much as I would have liked, considering it was a huge pain in the butt. Originally, I purchased this water fountain to go out onto the porch, but I received it months ago when it was still too cold, and it's been living in the bathroom. The cats really like it where it is, and so I won't be putting it out into the oasis. It'll stay put where it is. And so that brings me to the last element that I'd like to add, and that's a sandbox. I'm curious to find out if this is just the dumbest idea ever, but I would like to provide them the opportunity to have something to dig in. Will they ignore it? Will they use it as a litter box? Probably, but if it's a huge flop, then I'll just convert it over to more cat grass. But for now, I'm gonna fill up another hay trough with some play sand, place it in a corner away from the screens so it won't get wet while it rains, and see what happens. Like I said, if it's a huge flop, I'll just swap it out for another bed of cat grass, which has been growing incredibly well. I've planted plenty of cat grass before, but always in small planters inside my home, and my experience has been that they've lasted like a week and a half, something like that, before they really start to die off. They have not lasted as long as I would have liked. But this planter out here, I planted several weeks before this planter here, and both containers have been consistently watered, been in the sunlight, both were planted using the same soil and using the same seeds. So what's going on here exactly, I don't know, but I am absolutely delighted that the outdoor box is lasting as long as it is. But at some point it'll die off, and at that point I'll just rotate it out for the next one. Thanks for joining me for today's video. I know it's a different one, but it was really nice for me to complete a different project, practice some other skills, and of course, provide fulfillment for my best snuggle bug. I hope you're all having a wonderful week. Next week, I'll be back with another sewing video, so stay tuned for that. Maybe subscribe, like, comment, do all of the things. And that's it. I'll see you next week. Bye, guys. I just happened to look outside and saw the sand spread all over the place, and lo and behold, I think it's safe to say the sandbox is a huge hit.